What if I were to reveal unto thee that Frodo's harrowing pilgrimage unto the cracks of doom was not the solitary road to shatter the ruling ring? Deep within the vast tapestries of Tolkien's legendarium lie 10 forgotten paths that might have unmade the Shadow's most fell instrument. As one who hath spent an age poring over every parchment the professor penned, every draft his son compiled, and every echo of ancient days, I have discerned a truth. The Council of Elrond, for all their majesty, may have overlooked possibilities hidden within their own chronicles. Tonight we shall descend into the forgotten lore, the ancient powers, and the untapped potentials of Middle-earth. These are no mere fancies. They are rooted in the very foundations of the world's making, from the secret fire of Gandalf to the song that shaped the heavens. 10 paths that could have altered the fate of all. Some required wisdom lost since the elder days, others a courage few could summon. Yet they remained there, waiting in the shadows of history. Settle now into thy dwelling, and prepare to behold the War of the Ring, through eyes unclouded. For the road not taken might have led to salvation just the same. Envision Mithrandir upon the bridge of Khazad-dûm, staff upraised, declaring, I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. In that moment of defiance against the shadow of Udin, the Grey Pilgrim unveiled his true celestial nature. But what if that same secret fire, the flame imperishable breathed into creation by the All-Father, could have been turned against the ring? The connection runneth deep, threading back to the foundation of Ea itself. Tolkien described this fire as the power behind all that is, the divine spark that kindled the Ainulindale. Gandalf, as a Loren of the Maiar, served Eru directly before his incarnation in Middle-earth. His words were no mere poetry. They were a testament to his essence. The same power that lit the first dawn flowed through the Astari. Though constrained by mortal form, consider the ring's crafting. Sauron poured his malice and will into the gold, yet he worked within a discord learned from Morgoth. Every act of the Ainur was but a variation of the great theme. Even when corrupted, Sauron's spell was but a discordant note within the primordial symphony. This truth opens a door the Council never dared to tread. The flame imperishable represents the original creative force, predating all shadow and all corruption. When Gandalf faced the Balrog, a corrupted Maia like Gorthaur himself, he fought not merely with fire, but with the light of the beginning. He called upon the flame that existed before Melkor's rebellion. If it could vanquish Durin's bane, why could it not unmake the ring? The tragedy lay in the chains placed upon the wizards. They were forbidden to match Sauron's might directly, sent only to guide. Yet unmaking the ring is not domination. It is the restoration of harmony. Tolkien hinted that in extremity, greater authority might be granted. Imagine if the White Wizard, standing in the ruins of Isengard, had summoned the power that sang the world into being. Confronted with the flame imperishable, the ring might have simply ceased, not consumed by heat, but corrected at its foundation. The evidence is scattered like starlight. The Valar's reshaping of Arda, the remaking of the world after the fall of Atalante, all point to powers beyond the physical. The ring was mighty, yet it was bound by the laws of the one who governs all creation. What haunts the mind is how close they stood to this revelation. On the bridge, and later when the White Rider returned, the pieces were there. He had proven the flame could destroy ancient evils. He simply never turned it upon the golden band. Sometimes the most profound ends hide in plain sight, waiting for the wise to see the link between the cosmic and the personal. There is something deeply unsettling about Iarwain Ben-Adar, his complete indifference to the ruling ring. When Frodo donned the ring in Tom's house and remained visible, and when Tom wore it to no effect, we witnessed an impossible truth. Tolkien was revealing a fundamental reality of Middle-earth. Tom was here before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop. He is a being who exists outside the flow of history and power. He is eldest. He predates the very foundations of corruption and Arda. The ring creates connection and dependency, a link to the Dark Lord's will. All beings exist within a framework Sauron can manipulate, all except Tom. His immunity is not resistance. It is a total disconnection from the system that makes the ring's power possible. Consider the implications. What would befall the ring if it dwelt forever in a realm where the shadow's will simply cannot reach? The ring is sustained by a spiritual cord across distance. But what happens when it encounters that which predates it entirely? Tom represents a remnant of Arda unmarred, preserved in a small corner of the world. His power is a state of grace. In his presence, the ring's power does not merely fail, it ceases to exist. He operates under older laws and deeper truths. The wise dismissed Tom, fearing he would lose the ring. But they thought only of guardianship, not of transformation. What if the solution was to place it permanently beyond the shadow's reach, where Tom's influence might erode its malice? There is precedent. The Silmarils burned the evil, yet remained harmless to the pure. The ring's power was artificial, maintained by will. Exposure to Tom's ancient innocence might have acted like spiritual acid, dissolving the bonds that held Sauron's power together. The tragedy is that this required a surrender the wise could not contemplate, to abandon the ring entirely to a power they did not command. In a war of swords and fire, perhaps the answer was always to be found in flowers and the songs of the old forest. The Seeing Stones of Numenor hold secrets that even the king and the wizard never fully mastered. They were conduits into the mind, transcending physical barriers. And therein lay a possibility so dangerous it is well it was avoided. The Master Stone of Osgiliath was the most potent, capable of coordinating all others. When it was lost, Middle-earth lost much. But what if the network were linked against Sauron, while he was psychically connected through his own ruling ring? The ring made the Dark Lord vulnerable in ways he did not grasp. His consciousness expanded to encompass his entire realm, but a consciousness extended is a target. What happens when multiple stones work in concert to strike at one mind? Picture Aragorn at Orthanc and Denethor at Minas Tirith, focusing their combined psychic energy directly into Sauron's eye. Not to spy, but to create a feedback loop of such intensity that it would shatter the mental pathways binding the ring to its master. When Pippin looked into the stone, Sauron's reaction was immediate and violent. His rage was total, but his focus was finite. Magnified through multiple stones, his psychic defenses might have collapsed. The ring would lose cohesion in that moment of chaos. The knowledge existed. Aragorn had contested the Dark Lord and emerged victorious. Denethor had wrestled him for years. The pieces were there, waiting for the pattern to be seen. Yet the risks were astronomical. It could have left their minds as empty shells. But in a war against total shadow, perhaps such a gamble was worth the cost. Strength turned back upon itself is a mighty weapon. The forges of Valinor once rang with hammers that shaped light into imperishable beauty. Eglos and Narsil were wrought with a firecraft that predated Sauron's own knowledge. They were products of the light of the two trees. Hidden within that ancient knowledge lay secrets to unravel the ring. Subcreation, as Tolkien wrote, was not mere manipulation of matter, it was singing reality into new forms. The Noldor learned this from Aule himself. Feanor's Silmarils were the pinnacle of this art. Gil-galad, Elrond, and Círdan. Between them, they held fragments of lore that Sauron had never mastered. Lore of the Elder Days. The ring's invulnerability to all but the fire of Orodruin reveals Sauron's limitations. He used the hottest flame he could control. But Noldoran firecraft was not about heat. It was about harmony with creation. The difference between brute force and perfect understanding. Narsil's fragments retained the power to cut the ring. That was no chance. It was firecraft so pure it severed spiritual bonds. If a broken blade could do this, what might a flame kindled with such perfection accomplish against the gold itself? When the blade was reforged as Andúril, the smiths of Imladris had to recreate the techniques of the Elder Days. They possessed the fragments of the greater firecraft. Elrond, herald of Gil-galad, had seen the forging of the three. He understood how Celebrimbor had surpassed even his ancestors to create objects Sauron could never corrupt. That same understanding, applied to destruction, might have unmade what seemed unmakeable. They focused only on Mount Doom. They forgot that the fire they needed might be kindled by art rather than found in nature. In their very halls stood those who remembered when light was first captured in crystal. The Noldor carried secrets of fire and light. The straight road westward leads to Valinor, where the light of the trees still shines in memory and in fact. When Frodo sailed at the end, he entered a realm where corruption cannot exist. But what if the ring had made that journey? Valinor exists in a state of grace that predates the marring of Arda. It is a fragment of the world as it was meant to be. In such a place, what power could Sauron's ring retain? Their spirits are renewed there, their connection to the music restored. The Undying Lands restore life to its original purity. The ring, a spiritual parasite, would find no discord to exploit. Like a disease trying to infect a perfectly healthy body, its malevolence might simply find no purchase in a realm of absolute spiritual health. Behold that same unswerving gaze, that same absolute attention, but magnified through the clarity of multiple stones, sustained until Sauron's psychic ramparts simply crumbled under the weight. The ring, dependent on his will, might have lost its very cohesion. The lore for such an undertaking endured within Middle-earth. Aragorn had proven he could contest the shadow through the stone and emerge unbowed. Denethor, for all his eventual despair, had wrestled with the Dark Lord for long years and was never fully quelled. The Dunedain possessed ancient wisdom regarding the stone's creation. All the threads were there, waiting for a hand to weave the pattern. Of a certainty, the perils would have been beyond measure. Failure might have withered the minds of all who dared, leaving the lords of the free peoples as hollow shells, while the shadow's power remained whole. Yet in a war where the only other choice was slow strangulation, perhaps such a gamble was worth the weighing. At times, the most potent weapon against a tyrant's strength is that very strength turned back upon him, like a river dammed until it bursts. The forges of the Blessed Realm once echoed with hammers that could shape light itself into a beauty that would never fade. When Gil-galad and Elendil confronted Gorthaur upon the slopes of Orodruin, they bore arms wrought with a firecraft of old, firecraft that predated the Dark Lord's own mastery of the smithy. Aeglos and Narsil were more than mere blades. They were of the Elder World, forged by those who had walked in the light of the trees before the world was marred. Within that lore lay secrets to unravel the ring. The truth is found in the nature of subcreation. When the Valar shaped Arda, they were not merely moving matter, they were singing reality into being, through the music of creation. The Noldor, greatest in craft, learned these arts directly from the great smith, Aule, in the Blessed Realm. Feanor's crafting of the Silmarils was the zenith of this art, capturing the very light of the trees within crystal and gem. But Feanor was not the solitary master of firecraft among the Noldor. Gil-galad, the last High King, carried the lineage of that wisdom. Elrond, who stood beside him at the siege of Barad-dûr, had been tutored by those who remembered the glory of Valinor. Círdan the Shipwright, oldest of the Eldar remaining in these lands, possessed lore reaching back to the awakening at Cuiviénen. Among them, they held fragments of firecraft that Sauron had never attained, techniques of the Elder Days when the world was malleable. The ring's apparent immunity to all flame save that of Mount Doom reveals a crucial truth. Sauron used only what he knew. He used the volcanic forge of Orodruin because it was the limit of his mastery, the hottest flame he could summon or command. But the firecraft of the Noldor was not of heat alone. It was of harmony with the fundamental forces of Ea. The difference between Sauron's forge and true elven craft was the gulf between brute force and perfect understanding. According Narsil, a blade so perfectly wrought that even its shards retained the power to sever the ring and the spirit that clung to it. That was no mere fortune. It was the product of a craft so pure it created an edge capable of cleaving spiritual bonds as well as flesh. If Isildur's broken sword could do this, what might a flame kindled with such perfection achieve against the Golden Band itself? The knowledge was not utterly vanished. When Narsil was forged anew as Anduril in Rivendell, it required the wisdom of the original arts. The smiths of Imladris did not merely mend a blade, they had to call upon the firecraft of the Elder Days to work metal from Valinor's time. If they could reforge the flame of the West, they possessed the secrets that might have been turned against the shadow. Elrond's wisdom runs deep. As herald to the High King, he witnessed the execution of the greatest works of the Second Age. He saw the forging of Vilya, the mightiest of the three, and knew how Celebrimbor had surpassed even his ancestors in creating things of power, objects that Sauron could never truly taint. That same understanding, turned toward unmaking, might have found a way. The tragedy is how narrowly they focused their vision. When the council debated, they sought only the obvious path, the fire of the earth. They did not consider that the fire they required might be kindled by art, rather than found in nature. In their very halls stood beings who remembered when light was captured in crystal, and the Silmarils held the unmarred radiance of Valinor. Sometimes the greatest treasures are those we carry within ourselves. The Noldor bore secrets of fire and light that could have scorched the dark. The straight road westward from the Grey Havens leads to more than refuge. It leads to the Undying Lands, where the two trees still shine in memory. When Frodo sailed west with Mithrandir and the Eldar, he entered a realm where corruption is a thing unknown. or the very air is the breath of the great music. But what if the One Ring had made that journey, not as a burden to flee, but as a darkness to be cleansed? Valinor exists in a state of grace that predates the marring of the world. When the Valar withdrew after the great battle, they preserved a fragment of Arda as it was meant to be, unshadowed. The light Eärendil carries in his Silmaril is the very light of the beginning. It is the radiance that existed ere the shadow entered. In such a place, what power could Sauron's ring retain? When the elves reach those shores, their spirits are renewed, their weariness healed. The Undying Lands do not merely preserve, they restore. The ring, though fell, was yet a created thing, bound by the fundamental laws of Ea. In Valinor, those laws operate under the principles of the unmarred. The ring was a parasite feeding upon the connection to the music, corrupting that bond to serve a dark will. But in Valinor, all exists in perfect harmony with the theme of Eru. There would be no discord for the ring to seize upon, no spiritual frailty to corrupt. Like a plague trying to infect a body of light, the ring's malevolence might simply find no purchase in a realm of absolute spiritual health. The journey itself would be the cure. The straight road is more than a path of water. It is a passage through the circles of the world, leading away from the marred and toward the perfect. Each league would take it further from the shadow's reach, deeper into waters blessed by Ulmo, and closer to shores where Manwë's eagles soar. Gandalf's presence would have been the key. As a Loren, he belonged to Valinor, and his authority there was far beyond his constraints in Middle-earth. When he spoke of the secret fire, he spoke as one who had walked the gardens of Lorien before the sun was kindled. In his true home, surrounded by the powers, he might have called upon forces his mission on earth had forbidden. Elrond, Galadriel, Círdan, all held the right to sail. They could have carried the ring not as a weapon, but as a pilgrimage of healing. In the halls of Manwë or the gardens of Yavanna, in the presence of the singers of the world, the ring might have been cleansed, transformed from a yoke of domination into perhaps nothing at all. The beauty of this path is its gentleness. No fire, no violence, only the slow restoration of harmony. In a tale of so much loss, perhaps the most fitting end was not destruction, but redemption. The malice washed away by waves that remember the youth of the world. Its power dissolved in light that has never known a shadow. The Silmarils of Feanor contain that which no power in this Middle Earth can ever taint. The original light of the two trees, hallowed by Varda herself ere the first darkness fell. These were more than jewels. They were objects in perfect opposition to all that Sauron represents. And therein lies a profound hope, not merely to destroy the ring, but to purify it through spiritual alchemy. The light of the trees was the visible music of creation, the harmony that existed before Melkor's discord. When the Elentari blessed the gems, she sealed within them a piece of the world as intended. No evil could touch them, no shadow could dim them. To the pure, they were beauty. To the foul, they were a holy fire that sears. Morgoth himself could not bear their touch, his hands scarred forever. If they could burn the master, what of the servant's work? Yet this is not about burning. It is about transformation. The Silmarils actively turned darkness into light, bringing hope to all who beheld them. Imagine if the One Ring had been brought into contact with a Silmaril, not as a weapon, but in a union of spiritual alchemy. The ring held malice and discord. The Silmaril held harmony and purity. The uncorrupted light of the first dawn. The wisdom for such a union remained. Elrond had seen the jewels in their glory. Galadriel was of the house of Feanor and had walked in the light. Between them, they might have possessed the understanding of spiritual engineering required for such a task. The ring's gold would need to be reforged, not in flame, but in the presence of the Silmaril's radiance, allowing the hallowed light to permeate its atoms. The malice within would encounter absolute, uncompromising purity. What emerged might not have been a ring at all, but a jewel containing the memory of malice transformed into harmony, redeeming the instrument of domination into a beacon of hope. In the beginning was the music. All that is song, and all discord can be corrected through the perfect melody. The One Ring was but a discordant note introduced by a rebellious will, but discord can be resolved by those who remember the theme. This knowledge survived into the Third Age. Gandalf, as a Loren, had participated in the singing of the world. He had seen how Eru wove even Melkor's discords into a greater beauty. Saruman possessed similar memories, though he sought to master them. Radagast the Brown carried the songs that summoned life from the earth. They were scent diminished, but the music was the very structure of reality. With proper preparation, they might have sung a small correction back into the world, not to remake it, but to restore a portion. Luthien's voice had cast the Dark Lord into slumber. Tom Bombadil's songs commanded the forest. The elves used song to heal. The lore required for such integration survived in the memories of those who had beheld the Silmarils in their ancient glory. Elrond had seen their radiance. Galadriel, of the House of Finwë, had walked in the light of the trees before the great darkness fell. Between them, they might have held the wisdom to attempt such a union, not through mere craft, but through spiritual engineering. The ring's gold would need to be reforged, not in fire alone, but in the presence of that hallowed light, allowing the radiance to permeate its every atom. There, the malice of Sauron would encounter the blessed light sealed by Varda, the Kindler, and corruption would face absolute purity. What might emerge is not a ring, but a new jewel, carrying the memory of malice, yet transformed utterly into a vessel of harmony. Instead of the destruction of power, this path offered its redemption, turning an instrument of chains into a beacon of hope. In a world of loss, the greatest victory might have been not the shattering of evil, but its sublimation into something beautiful and pure. For in the beginning was the music, and within that song was all that ever was, or ever could be, woven by the thought of Eru. When Tolkien penned the Ainulindale, he established the law. Reality itself is a song, and all discord may yet be corrected. The One Ring, for all its terrible weight, was but a discordant note in a vast symphony, a rebellion in gold against the great theme. But discord, however clamorous, can be mended by those who remember the original melody. This knowledge survived into the Third Age. It was preserved by those who sang before time began. Gandalf, as a Loren, had been among the Maiar who beheld the weaving of the themes. Saruman the White possessed such memories before his fall. Radagast the Brown carried the songs that called forth all that groweth. Though diminished and veiled in flesh, the music remained the fundamental structure of their reality. Under the proper alignment, those who once sang creation into being might have sung a small correction back into the world's fabric. Not to remake the entire world, but to restore one small portion, the ring, to its proper, unmarred harmony. Precedent aboundeth in the power of song. Luthien's voice cast the Dark Lord of old into a deep and enchanted slumber. Tom Bombadil's rhymes commanded the old forest. The elves of Imladris used song to heal both the spirit and the body. Even the simple walking songs of the halflings warded off the shadows of the Barrow Downs. But this would require a grander harmony. Imagine the combined voices of the Astari raised together, not in spells of command, but in the pure melody of the void's first light. The ring was born of spiritual discord. To correct it required identifying the exact note of malice and singing its resolution. This was not an act of overpowering evil, but of revealing it as it truly was, a temporary departure from the eternal song. The fall of Curanir makes this possibility poignant. Had he remained true, his voice of craft would have been essential to the harmony. The wizards were sent in concert, their powers meant to complement. Their union might have mended even the deepest discord. There is a profound gentleness in this. No violence, no destruction, but the gradual restoration of a universe out of tune. The gold might remain, but its malice would dissolve back into the great music, like a note finally finding its place in the symphony. Even Sauron's greatest work would have become part of the beauty it tried to corrupt, proving the shadow cannot silence the song. Yet consider also the great dragons of the elder days, whose breath was kindled in the terrible deeps of Angband. Glaurung the Golden and Encalagon the Black possess flames older and more primal than Sauron's mastery of the forge. These were not mere beasts, but creatures whose fire carried echoes of the very discord Melkor introduced into the world. In that ancient origin lay a possibility the Council overlooked: the hierarchy of flames and their respective authorities. Conventional wisdom pointed to Mount Doom, because that is where the ring was forged, in the Earth's own burning heart. But Sauron learned his craft from Morgoth, and the dragons were Morgoth's children in a way the Dark Lord's servant never was. Glaurung's flame, which could melt dwarf mail and stone, was spiritually ancient, kindled before Sauron had mastered his own power. When the father of dragons reduced Nargothrond to ruin, he wielded forces that predated the techniques used for the One Ring. Ancient flame in Tolkien's world often carried precedence over newer workings. The Silmarils themselves could only be marred by the Earth's heart. Dragonfire had the spiritual property to melt rings of power, as it did with the seven given to the lords of the dwarves. Smaug's flame, though mighty, was but a diminished echo of the drakes of old, yet even he might have challenged the works of the wise. The tragedy is that by the Third Age, the true fire dragons were gone, and the worms of the Grey Mountains were but shadows of their ancestors. The window for this path closed with the death of the great worms, yet fragments of that fire might have lingered in dragonglass or bone. Wise lore masters might have known how to rekindle such flames from these remnants. Elrond, who witnessed the fall of Gondolin, knew this fire. If any could identify a source of fire with the authority to unmake the ring, it would be the Lord of Imladris, keeper of ancient memories. The irony is profound. The very discord that birthed the dragons might have contained the power to undo the servant's masterpiece. Sometimes the cure for a poison lies within the poison itself, and the fire to destroy the ring might have been the fire that taught its making. Perhaps even Melkor's rebellion was part of a greater design, a discord that carried the seeds of its own correction. And what of the dead men of Dunharrow? They carried a curse more powerful than the grave, an oath broken that bound them for 3 millennia. When Isildur cursed them, he invoked spiritual laws that operated beyond the boundaries of life and death. In that curse lay a power that might have been turned against the ring if one knew how to direct their supernatural resolve. The Oathbreakers were spirits bound by the forces of promise and fulfillment. By fleeing the last alliance, they violated their own nature. Their redemption required them to stand against Sauron. Aragorn summoned them to Eric to fulfill this ancient obligation. But what if fighting Sauron's power included the destruction of its source? Their will had become a force capable of affecting the physical world. Focused by millennia of anguish, they overwhelmed the Corsairs and made victory possible. Such will might have performed the impossible. Envision Aragorn commanding the dead to march upon Mount Doom itself, not to slay orcs, but to complete their oath by shattering the shadow. The dead were immune to the ring's seduction. They had already lost life, peace, and the hope of rest. What could the ring offer them? They were perhaps the only beings who could handle the ring without risk of corruption, driven only by the desperate need for release. They were not slowed by terrain, nor stopped by mortal armies. They might have accomplished in days what took the halflings months. The tragedy lies in the narrowness of the timing. Aragorn had to see that their oath could be fulfilled in ways beyond simple service and battle. Sometimes the greatest weapons are forged of guilt and shame, transformed into a singular and relentless purpose. Then there is the power of truth. Hidden within the Palantiri was a potency that went beyond mere far-seeing. They possessed the ability to strip away deception and reveal things as they truly were in the eyes of the Valar. When the Master Stone of Osgiliath was lost, the world lost a tool that might have revealed the ring's deepest secrets. Tolkien understood the link between sight and knowledge, that true sight reveals true names, and true names grant dominion. The Seeing Stones were crystallizations of the principle that nothing can hide from the light of the beginning. The Master Stone was designed to coordinate the network and pierce through any illusion or spiritual concealment. The One Ring was a construct based on deception. It appeared a simple band, but was a spiritual parasite existing in 2 worlds at once. If the Master Stone were wielded by one of sufficient purity, it might have revealed the ring's true name in the language of creation. In Arda, to know a thing's true name is to hold power over it. Gandalf revealed his identity to the Balrog. Bombadil named the trees. The knowledge of this use survived in the traditions of the kings of Númenor and the libraries of the stewards of Gondor. Denethor himself had wrestled with the shadow through his stone, proving its resilience even in the hands of those not of royal blood. Imagine the king standing before the Master Stone, perceiving every thread of malice and every bond of domination within the gold. With that knowledge, destruction becomes a matter of speaking the right words, the linguistic principles that gave the world form. This path uses truth as a weapon against the lie. Once its structure was laid bare, the ring might have been compelled to unmake itself. As we conclude these forgotten paths, one truth remains. Middle-earth contained more possibilities than even the wise could discern. The council thought as generals in a war, when perhaps they needed to think as scholars of the first theme. They sought the obvious road, while elegant solutions lay hidden in their own histories and their own fading memories. These alternatives reveal that it was never merely about strength against strength, but about truth against shadow. Ancient knowledge and the fundamental forces of creation could always overcome the temporary discord of the enemy. The ring seemed invincible, only because those who faced it forgot they carried echoes of the music that sang the world into being. These possibilities were always there, in the margins of the Red Book and the whispers of the elder days. Imagine this alternative. Aragorn, instead of leading the dead only to the southern havens, commanding them to march upon the very slopes of Mount Doom, not to clash with orc or man, but to fulfill their oath in the most fundamental sense, by shattering the very foundation of the Dark Lord's power. The Ring-Bearers' quest would have become their own, their final chance for redemption tied not to a single field of blood, but to the war's ultimate resolution. The dead men were immune to the ring's seduction in ways the living could never be. They had already surrendered life, peace, and the hope of rest. What temptation could the ring offer to those who had already paid the ultimate price for their ancient treachery? Their existence as oath-bound spirits made them perhaps the only beings in Arda who could bear the burden without the rot of corruption. They were unhindered by the frailty of the flesh, the terrain of the enemy, or the reach of his armies. If the heir of Isildur had commanded them to cast the gold into the fire, they might have achieved in days what cost Frodo and Sam months of agony. Their own guilt would have served as the spur to succeed where all others might falter. The tragedy of this path lies in the depth of understanding required. Aragorn needed to see that their redemption could take many forms, that their supernatural resolve was the key to ending the shadow forever. Sometimes the mightiest weapons are forged of shame transformed into purpose. Yet consider also the Master Stone of Osgiliath, which held a power far exceeding simple far-seeing or the speech of minds. It possessed the virtue to reveal truth itself, to strip away the shroud of deception, and behold things as they truly were. When that stone was swallowed by the great river, Middle-earth was bereft of more than a mere artifact of light. It lost a tool that might have pierced the ring's deepest veils. Tolkien's vision of the Palantiri was rooted in the union of perception and power. These were not mere marvels of craft, but the realization of the law that true sight reveals true names, and true names grant dominion. The Seeing Stones were crystallizations of the truth that nothing can remain hidden forever from the gaze of the wise. When the wizard warned the halfling against the Stone of Orthanc, he knew it operated on levels of reality perilous to the unprepared. The Master Stone was the crown of the network, designed to coordinate the whole and pierce through every spiritual concealment. Through it, a wielder of great skill could have stripped away all disguise, revealing the fundamental reality beneath. Herein lies the hidden path. The ruling ring was a work founded upon a lie. It appeared a golden band, yet was a spiritual parasite. It existed in the physical world and the realm of the unseen simultaneously. Its power was fed by the fact that most saw only the golden mask. Had the Master Stone been recovered, it might have unveiled the ring's true name, its identity in the language of the beginning. In Arda, to know the true name of a thing is to hold it in thy hand. This principle echoes throughout the ages, from Gandalf's defiance of the Balrog to the songs of Tom Bombadil that commanded the very roots of the old forest. The lore to wield the stones thus was preserved in the halls of Gondor and the ancient libraries of the Stewards. Denethor himself had contended with the eye through his stone for many a year, proving they could be used to resist the shadow. Imagine Aragorn, the rightful king, standing before the recovered Master Stone with the ruling ring placed before him. Through its true sight, he might have perceived the complete spiritual architecture Sauron had wrought, every thread of malice and hidden weakness. With that revelation, destruction would have become not a labor of fire, but a matter of speaking the right words of unmaking. This is the most elegant of ends, using truth as a weapon against the lie, and knowledge as the instrument of liberation. Once its true name was spoken, the ring might have been compelled to dissolve its own bonds through the linguistic laws of the world. As our journey through these eclipsed paths draweth to its close, one truth shineth with a singular light. Middle-earth contained far more possibilities than even the wise could perceive in their hour of darkness. The Council of Elrond, for all their virtue, pondered as generals of war when they might have looked as scholars of creation. They sought the heavy road, while the swift and subtle paths lay hidden in the dusty scrolls of their own long history. Each of these 10 paths revealeth the nature of Tolkien's world. It was never merely a struggle of blade against blade. The professor built a realm where truth held dominion, where ancient lore carried weight, and the forces of the song could always mend the discord. The ring seemed unassailable only because those who faced it had let slip the memory of the music that kindled the stars. What moves the spirit most is that these possibilities were ever present, waiting in the margins of the great chronicles. Tom Bombadil's immunity was no mere whimsy, it was a testament. The Seeing Stones were more than mirrors, they were keys. The power of the wizards was not merely to cast down Balrogs, but to remember the secret fire that gave life to all things. Every tool required for the victory was already within their grasp, if only they had the eyes to see the connections. Perhaps that is the true lesson, that the greatest battles are won not by the strength of the arm, but by the clarity of the heart and memory. The War of the Ring was ultimately a war of remembering against forgetting, of harmony against the discord of the shadow. These alternative roads remind us that wisdom, once earned, never truly vanishes. It merely waits for the right hand to take it up. It waits for the right question to bring it back into the light of the sun. Now, I turn to you, fellow wanderers of Middle-earth. Which of these forgotten roads resonates most deeply within your own understanding of the legendarium? Have you discerned other secrets hidden within the professor's letters or the drafts of the elder days? Cast thy thoughts into the well of discourse below. Let us continue to walk these paths together. And if this descent into the hidden lore hath stirred thy curiosity, then bind thyself to this chronicle. Subscribe and ring the bell of summoning. We shall continue to explore the shadowed corners of Arda and unearth the secrets that even the most devoted have missed. The road goes ever on, and there are always new horizons to behold in the vast landscape of Tolkien's imagination. Until we meet again, may your pilgrimage be filled with wonder, and may you ever remember that in the deepest night, wisdom and hope endure. Farewell, friends of the Shire, keepers of the flame, and guardians of memory. The adventure continues, beyond the sight of the towers and the reach of the sea. Namari, may the stars shine upon your faces. The chronicle is complete. Keepers of the flame, the light of Arda is in your hands.